Welcome to the Guitar Breakdown, a review series of factory-made acoustic guitars designed to help make you a more informed consumer. Like most reviews, we'll of course discuss the guitar's features and tell you how it plays and sounds, but we don't stop there. We'll then run the guitar through a series of tests designed to help simulate some, shall we say, less than desirable situations to see how it holds up to just about any lifestyle. We'll then crack the guitar open to see if the manufacturers are putting as much care into the construction of the guitar as they are into trying to sell it to you. All of this is done by a master luthier who understands what goes into making a quality instrument. At the end of the video, we'll give the guitar a final breakdown score to see how it stacks up against the competition. You work hard for your money. Let us help you spend it wisely. Okay, the Epiphone, inspired by Gibson G-45. That's what we have for you guys today. So anybody who's watched these breakdowns before, you'll know that we're going to go over the full review of this guitar as always. But today's going to be a little bit different. This breakdown, I think, has to be treated differently because there's no way you can review this Epiphone J-45 without kind of subconsciously comparing it to the Gibson G-45, and that's because by their very own kind of advertising and everything, it's called the Inspired by Gibson Epiphone J-45. We're going to kind of go through everything on this guitar and decide, is it as good, worse, or better than the Gibson G-45? So if you're watching this review, I almost guarantee that you've been online and you've checked out the Gibson G-45 and you saw that it's $2,850 as of the making of this video. And you've also landed on another page that took you to this particular guitar. And you went down to the bottom of the page and you saw the specs and you went, dude, these are like the same exact guitar. But this one over here, the Epiphone that I have in my hand right here, is $2,200 cheaper. And that's literally what I did when we pulled it out of the case, obviously. I went, okay, so if I put a blindfold on right now, would I be able to tell you, is this a different guitar than a Gibson? Honestly, no is the answer to that. But I do want to cover what some of those differences are just so that you guys will know. It does have a Sitka spruce soundboard, just like the one on Gibson's as well. And to my luthier eye, once again, I've been building acoustic guitars for 15 years. The quality of the wood on here is fantastic. Gibson sometimes will hide a lesser quality piece of wood underneath that sunburst. I'm not seeing any of that here. The back and sides of a Gibson G-45 are solid mahogany, just like this, and a really nice piece of mahogany as well, all very solid. Same thing for the sides. The other thing that I thought was interesting on this inspired by Gibson Epiphone J-45 is that it actually has almost an exact identical neck to the now Gibson J-45 in the sense that it's just a single one-piece neck. It is not a scarf joint or a stacked heel. Those of you that are into building guitars will know what I mean there. The headstock may or may not break off on you in the Gibson tradition. The other thing that this guitar has, just like the Gibson equivalent, is that it has the plastic binding all around it. It even has the vintage Gibson style headstock on this thing. The nut width on this guitar is 1.69 inches, which is only, just take it to metric here, is only 0.8 millimeters narrower, and the vast majority of people who play guitar would not be able to feel the difference between those. And the other big thing that people talk about a lot on the forums is the fact that this Epiphone has a different scale length than the Gibson G-45. And I was like, okay, well, let me look that up and see what the difference is. And this part made me chuckle because the difference is 0.6 millimeters. This one has a slightly shorter scale length. That's the difference in the scale length on these guitars. So it's not something that you're going to feel. I don't know anybody who could tell the difference between 0.6 millimeters in scale length. The next thing that I could find that was different on this guitar versus the Gibson equivalent is the actual makeup of the fretboard and the bridge. So on a Gibson, it's East Indian rosewood, which is, a pretty standard option on most guitars these days. And on this Epiphone, instead of using that, they're using a wood called Indian laurel, which is a lighter colored wood. I don't know if it's actually a true rosewood or not, but it certainly looks like a rosewood. I believe it's probably not a true rosewood. But honestly, you're not going to hear the difference between Indian rosewood and Indian laurel on your guitar. So that's one of the other differences that I've been able to find. Another probably much bigger thing that's different in this case is the finish. So a Gibson J-45 still uses nitrocellulose lacquer, which in my opinion, other than maybe a French polish, which nobody would mass produce with French polish, nitrocellulose lacquer is the best sonic finish you can put on a guitar. This guitar has a polyurethane finish on it, so that is a very big difference. But I do want to note that the polyurethane finish on this guitar, they have done it in a semi-gloss, which I think is really nice. It's a nice touch because it looks vintage. But they also go out of their way to make it very, very thin, which is always my biggest gripe with polyurethane. It's not just that it's poly, it's that it's poly and it looks like one of those river tables. And in this case, that's not what I'm seeing at all. I can actually still see little ripples in the finish where the actual fibers of the spruce go. Very similar to that you would see in a nitro finish. So yes, it does have a poly finish, but in my opinion, it's probably one of the best poly finishes I've seen on a guitar in a while. Something else that we talk about a lot of the times are the frets on these guitars. And the fret job on this guitar, although it's not a bound fretboard, so it's not a very difficult fretting task, these kind of can get mangled up sometimes on these lower end guitars. And not the case here whatsoever. They look really nicely pressed in, very nicely polished. They don't feel scratchy at all. And they are a nice kind of medium. I have not looked up like the actual size of the fret wire that they're using, but they just look like a nice middle down the road, not too big, not too small fret. So I think that that's great. It doesn't have a single buzzing fret on the entire guitar. And so, yeah, I gave it high marks for the fret work as well. One thing that I did want to mention on this guitar is the pick guard that's on it. I don't have a Gibson J-45 to compare this to, but I want to say that this pick guard that is on here is probably at least a 1/16 of an inch, like 3 millimeters thick. It's the thickest pick guard that I've ever seen on a guitar. And I don't understand why they went that route, but you can't tell me that that is good for making the guitar sound better. Maybe, you know what it probably was? It was probably Gibson saying, yes, but you have to put this super thick pickguard on there so it doesn't sound as good as the Gibsons. But we're going to figure that part out. But I did want to mention that super thick pickguard that is on this guitar. It just seemed a little bit weird. Another difference is the tuning machines on this guitar. So the Epiphone has 3 on-plate tuning machines, whereas the Gibson has individual tuning machines on them. Okay. Not a big deal in my opinion. It's just kind of an aesthetic thing. Another thing that's different on this guitar versus the Gibson is the fact that this one has real bone, nut, and saddle, whereas the Gibson has the Tusk branded nut and saddle on the guitar, which I'm going to start fights in the comment with this one, but I think that the bone, nut, and saddle are actually better than the Tusk. Tusk is a synthetic material. I think that the bone actually has a better sonic properties to it. So fight me in the comments on that one. And the other difference that I've been able to find with these, obviously, is the pickup that they come with standard. The Gibson J-45 comes with a really nice LR Bags pickup system inside of it, whereas this Epiphone just has kind of one of the lowest end Fishman pickup systems inside of it. But for $750, it comes with a pickup. One thing that I find quite silly is the fact that it does not come with a 9-volt battery. And Matt and I were talking, and maybe that's because they don't want to ship guitars with batteries in them so that they get battery acid on them. But, you know, throw the battery in the case. And the last difference, and this is the big one, but I also kind of understand, is that standard, this Epiphone J-45 does not come with a case at all. And I'm going to give them some leeway on this one because I feel like they've built you a Gibson J-45 for $750. The nice thing is that they actually offer options that you can buy with either a hard shell case or a soft shell case. You just have to pay some extra for it. But I think it's nice that they have given you an option to buy the guitar with no case, so you can keep that price at rock bottom. So if you're not planning on traveling with the guitar at all, you can just order it and have it shipped. And it was packaged very well when we got it. It had no damage, so don't be concerned about it being shipped with no case. But yeah, so I mean, honestly, what? Those differences, yes, I've listed maybe 6 of them, and they're different, but I don't think that any of them are particularly that much worse. If these two guitars, if the Gibson J-45 and the Epiphone J-45 were $500 difference, those differences would matter more to me. But the fact that we're talking about $2,200 more dollars for the Gibson, I don't think that those differences are enough to make me clutch my pearls. The next thing we need to talk about is the playability of this guitar. So we did cover that neck profile, right? We talked about how wide the nut was. We talked about how long the scale length is. So if you're a Gibson guy, if you own one or just fans of them, you're going to be really happy here. It has a C-shaped profile on it, and it feels very, very comfortable to me. As far as the playability of the action on the guitar, I gotta be honest, this is probably one of the most dialed in acoustic guitars that we've gotten so far in this guitar breakdown series. A lot of the times they show up to our doorstep, and for whatever reason, you're gonna need just muscle fingers just to push the strings down because it's so high up, and I have to just do an initial setup in the first place. Not the case here, not even by a little bit. It actually is almost exactly to the numbers that I would try to dial it into myself. I just took a string height gauge and checked at the 12th fret, and the action at the low E is 80 thousandths of an inch, and on the high E it is 60 thousandths of an inch, which is pretty much perfect. The neck is dead straight with just a kiss of relief inside of it, and when you look down the neck, I see absolutely no issues there. And the only critique I could say is maybe the action could come down at the nut just a little bit. I haven't measured it. It just feels maybe a kiss high. But all in all, whether they're the high-end guitars or the low-end guitars that we've reviewed on this channel, this one, in my opinion, is probably the absolute best. So that's super high marks, especially, once again, for $750. Okay, of course, we need to do the most important thing in any guitar review and tell you how it sounds, right? We need to see, is this Epiphone J-45 as good, worse, or better than the Gibson J-45? One of the things that I want to be honest with you guys about before we get into it, though, is the fact that I don't actually have a whole lot of experience with J-45s kind of in the music that I grew up on, as well as just coming through my workshop over the years. I've obviously played them, but they're not stamped into my head like a D18 is or something like that. But Mr. Matt Miller, who works with me, as you guys know, is a country boy, and he survived on mostly J-45 growing up, it turns out. And he's very, very much on the fact that this guitar has that iconic J-45 sound. So what I'm going to do is let you guys hear what it sounds like and let me know whether you agree or not. And I want to give you just a quick rundown of our signal chain so that you guys can trust what you're hearing and know that what you're getting is the real deal. We are going through a Zoom H6 using the XY microphone with the gain turned up to about 7. And we are about 8 to 10 inches away from the sound hole. I'm not doing any post-processing whatsoever, no compression, no EQ. We're just going to dump it right onto this tape here and let you guys hear it. So if you want to hear it most accurately, though, you need to be listening either with a good high-quality set of headphones or speakers in order to trust it. Because I don't know if you know this, but your cell phone speakers, they don't do a good job of being accurate. Just the thing. So what we're going to do, like we do in all of these, we're going to start off at E major and then work our way back through to E major again, through all the cowboy chords, let you guys hear what they sound like, let them ring, as it were. All right, so now the question is, what do I think of it? Kind of just running through it all. When we first pulled this guitar out, Matt and I obviously had many discussions about it and, the iconic J-45 sound. For those of you who don't know, the J-45 is known as this instrument that has this very specific sound. And part of what makes it so appealing, according to the street legend, is that it sonically fits really nicely in with the human voice. It leaves a lot of space for the human voice for the singer-songwriter types. And there's all these stories about people who been through all these guitars and then they finally got a J-45 and they just started spitting out songs like crazy. In fact, you just get on Sweetwater and look at the reviews of it right now and you'll see people who say that. And I've always joked around about the fact that that's a lot of words to say that the guitar doesn't sound very good, right? Because if it doesn't have bass and it doesn't have much trebles and it doesn't have all these things going on to get in the way of the human voice, then it probably sounds like crap. And honestly, when I play this guitar, even now, there's no bottom end, and it sounds like, for the lack of better words, rubbery. I think, and these are brand new strings. It just there's I almost don't even hear that the strings are metal almost. I certainly don't really hear a lot of woody tones coming through. But the more I play the guitar, the more I kind of sit here and kind of get to know it and I feel good with it in my hands, the more I kind of realize I kind of get it. I kind of get where it sits, and I'm trying to be better about that as a guitar player and a guitar builder, understanding the idea that there isn't this just one perfect guitar, but that certain types of guitars have certain roles to play, and I do find myself strumming it and going, this just feels very comfortable. This is like a pair of sweatpants, this guitar. That's almost as much to say about it, not sonically, but about just ergonomically as much as anything, and how it plays, because like I said, it's dialed in so well. It's just so nice. But what we'll do is we'll just run through some songs and let you guys hear what it sounds like, some of the songs I play in all of these breakdown videos, so that you guys can get a sense of how it compares to those other ones. Let's run through these real quick. Seems like a song like that, obviously it's JT, so it feels comfortable, but songs like that make you just go, ooh, I could see that. It just feels inviting and comfortable. It's just not, I'm used to, building high-end acoustic guitars. You're trying to squeeze every molecule of tone out of a guitar, just every bit of performance I can out of a piece of wood. That's just not what's happening here. And it seems to almost kind of work for itself. I still don't say that I love its sound, but I just think that it definitely has a role to play. So I'll do another something real quick for you. Let me do that again. Yeah. It's like when I'm doing that I'm like, okay. But it has as much to do with what I was talking about with the sound as it does with just how the guitar feels. So yeah, I don't want to say that it doesn't sound good. I want to say that it sounds like what I think people have been advertising it to me as. And in that sense, paying attention to the main goal here is this guitar better than the Gibson J-45? Do you think that what you just heard sounds $2,200 less good than a Gibson J-45? And we'll let you guys decide that. One thing I did want to mention that I forgot to talk about in the previous segment, though, is one of the slightest other differences between this Epiphone and the Gibson is the fact that this guitar actually is a 1/2 inch less deep than the Gibson. So it's slightly shallower, so it might have a little bit of an effect on its tone. So do keep that in mind as well. So with that, let's head over to the workshop and put this thing under the knife and see what it's all made of. Moving on to our lifestyle category, let's get started with our scratch resistance test. We do this to help simulate the years of wear and tear that a guitar might see over its lifetime. We do this by rubbing a ring of keys and belt buckles across the soundboard of the guitar for 60 seconds. This guitar has a thin polyurethane semi-gloss finish on it that's designed to look like a nitro finish from decades ago. My expectations for this test were pretty low because the finish looked pretty fragile, but to my surprise it held up perfectly to our scratch test. The finish did eventually scratch from some handling during filming, but in everyday wear and tear, it was acceptably durable. Now we'll do our dent resistance test. We do this to simulate the more impactful dents and dings that a guitar might experience over its lifetime. This test is performed by dropping a 1-inch carbide steel ball onto the soundboard and back of the guitar from a height of 18 inches. We've decided to do 2-ball drops on these guitars from now on so that we can get a better understanding of the top's true durability. In this case, both ball drops ended up giving the top a very small dent, and even caused a small hairline crack of about 1 inch in the length of the top on the second drop. Now we'll do the same thing to the back of the guitar. The back yielded a very similar result as the top in that the dent was about the same depth, and it also caused a small 1-inch crack in the mahogany back. This isn't that unexpected, as mahogany is a very straight-grained wood and can be a little more prone to cracking in this type of blunt force impact than other species. Don't mind those scratches you see on the back here. I caused most of those when I was sliding the guitar around my workbench during the making of the video. Okay, let's move on to our liquid resistance test. This is a test designed to simulate some of the chemicals the guitar might encounter if you were to take it to a live gig or go camping or maybe even take it to a beach trip. First, we're going to apply some bug spray, then suntan lotion, and then fresh water, followed by some salt water, and then vodka. And last but not least, we normally apply beer here, but we were actually out of that, so we used some hard seltzer. We're going to let these sit overnight and then see how the finish looks tomorrow. Okay, after wiping the liquids off of the guitar using naphtha, you can see that the poly finish held up surprisingly well. The only visible issue that we had was from the bug spray, where it caused the semi-gloss finish to become more of a satiny sheen. We tried to wipe it off further to see if we could remove the damage, but it seems as though it was pretty permanent. Other than that, she held up really well. Okay, moving on to our string tension resistance test. We do this by stringing up the guitar with 2 different gauges of strings, and then we're going to see how the geometry actually reacts to those different tensions. We're going to start off using D'Addario light gauge strings that exert 160 pounds of tension on the guitar. And then we're going to use this belly deflection gauge to see how much it moves once we put those heavy gauge strings on it, and here we are zeroing that out. Next, we're going to install heavy gauge strings on the guitar, and these exert 212 pounds of tension on it. And then we're going to see how much that affects the neck and belly of the instrument. Interestingly, the Epiphone's neck didn't move at all when we placed it under the tension of those heavy gauge strings. As you can see, the neck still shows a relief of 0 inches, and that's super good to see. The truss rod is doing its job in keeping that neck nice and stable. As for the belly, it didn't hold up quite as well. The additional 52 pounds of tension caused the top to belly out another 12 thousandths of an inch, and this caused the strings at the 12th fret to go from 90 thousandths to 120 thousandths. This might not sound like a lot, but you can certainly feel it. Okay, now on to our stand failure resistance test. Guitars don't often fall out of their stands, but as a guitar repairman for many years, I've seen the worst that can happen. And this test tells us how the guitars are going to perform if this nightmare scenario were to occur. As we all know, Gibsons, and by that standard Epiphones as well, have a reputation for having easily removable headstocks. With that said, we have yet to have a single guitar's headstock break during one of these tests, and that includes the Gibson G-45 we did last year. Unfortunately, that was not the case with this guitar. The only thing holding the headstock on after it was this plastic truss rod cover and its strings. As you can see, the break is clean and most likely repairable, but the surprising part to me was how the truss rod tried to blow out the back of the neck, and this is not something that we see very often under these kind of circumstances. Now let's move on to our heritage category, starting off with the trim and joinery quality. The Epiphone J-45 is well appointed and basically an exact copy of a Gibson J-45 in its appearance. The white plastic binding and rosette are well executed and show no signs of improper installation or gaps in its seams. In my opinion, the Epiphone is a few orders of magnitude better than that Gibson G-45 that we did last year. The fit and finish and the trim and the joinery makes this feel like it's much more of an expensive guitar than it actually is. My biggest complaint would be the massive pickguard on this guitar. As I mentioned earlier, it seems way too thick.
I actually measured it with calipers and it came out to a whopping 2 millimeters thick. This is about 4 to 5 times thicker than it needs to be and can be made a lot thinner, and I think that would help improve the tone of this guitar quite a bit. When it comes to finish quality, the Epiphone has what is called the aged vintage sunburst finish on it. It's most likely a polyurethane finish, which I normally don't like, as this type tends to feel pretty plasticky and often way too thick. But in this case, the finish has a very soft and thin feel to it. If I wasn't able to touch it, I would think that it's a nitro lacquer. It's safe to say that this is one of the best looking poly finishes that I've ever seen on a guitar. Semi-gloss sheen on it really makes it feel like a quality guitar. My only complaint here is that they spray the finish on the instrument with the neck still attached, and this is going to make future serviceability a problem. On to the fret quality. The frets are well installed and leveled, and I honestly have no complaints here, other than the small amount of finish that's spilt over onto the fretboard where the fretboard extends onto the body. Okay, now for the interior build quality. We actually do this by cutting the guitar right down the middle so that we can give you guys a good view of both the soundboard and the back. And then we're going to go over every part of that inside so that we can make sure that the manufacturer puts as much attention into the inside of the guitar as they do on the outside. After all, this is the most important part. Okay, first what we like to do is remove the center cap if the guitar does have one on that X brace so that we can get a look and see what the quality of that joint is. And here we can see that there is a slight gap, but it's actually not bad compared to a lot of the other guitars that we see. One thing that did surprise me was that Epiphone actually puts an Indian rosewood bridge plate here, and they actually put a slight finish on it, and that helps allow the guitar to be less prone to fluctuations of humidity. And that Indian rosewood is actually going to add some extra tone to the guitar. Now for the bracing, down here at the tone bars, we can see that in my opinion, these are actually pretty well executed. They could use a little bit more fit and finish sanding if they'd like, but the pieces of wood are pretty good quality considering the price point of the guitar. But most importantly, and most impressively, is they've actually taken all those braces and tucked them into the kerfing, which is nice. It adds a lot of strength, and it also allows them to take that bracing down a little bit lower so that we can get more tone out of the guitar. Another thing that was nice to see is that Epiphone actually puts side bracing on their guitars using solid wood, and this is something that's going to allow the guitar to be longer lasting and less prone to cracking. Something that really surprised me was down here on the tail block, and something you don't see often in manufactured guitars is they actually chamfer the end of it so that it doesn't dampen the top as much as it would if they didn't chamfer it. Big props to Epiphone for that. Moving up to the neck joint, you can see that Epiphone does a dovetail joint on this guitar. And it looks pretty well executed here. What you want is that little gap that you can see so that if in the event that you needed to do a neck reset in the future, you can actually get a needle down in there to put some steam in it, and it looks really nice. Now these little braces that you see on guitars are called fan braces, and in my opinion, a lot of the manufacturers make them way too large, and that seems to be the case here as well. These could probably be about a quarter as tall as they are right now and still do the job and actually help make the guitar sound a lot better. Okay, moving on to the back of the Epiphone. As we typically see on these guitars, the back has absolutely zero squeeze out on it, and I believe that's because you can see it really well through the sound hole, and these manufacturers take the time to make the backs look really good. The first thing that I noticed on the back though was that the back strap that runs right down the middle actually has the wrong grain orientation on it, and it should be perpendicular to the grain on the back. So in my opinion, that back strap actually doesn't provide any structural integrity to the guitar. One nice thing that is done is that the ladder braces on the guitar are actually tucked into the kerfing, and that's always something that you want to see, but unfortunately something we don't see often in even more expensive guitars. Once again, going to the tail block, it does have that chamfer on it, which allows more of the surface of the back and the top to vibrate. Okay, now that we've got the back off, it's easier for me to get my thickness caliper in here, and we can see how thick the top of the guitar is. I was a little surprised to see that it's actually over 3.5 millimeters thick. In my opinion, it could be quite a bit thinner, but I also understand why they make it this thick, because it makes it less prone to cracking.
Now let's see how the Epiphone, inspired by Gibson G-45, stacks up against the competition. Starting off with its features, like I said, this guitar is basically a Gibson J-45 for the fraction of the price. It basically comes with all of the same features as that guitar, other than a slightly less high quality wood for the fretboard and bridge, and we're going to give it a 9 out of 10. As far as the playability is concerned,
This guitar was by far the best setup guitar out of the box that we've received, so it's going to get full marks, a 10 out of 10 in that category. As far as the sound's concerned, we're going to go ahead and give it a 6 out of 10, and I do want to make a point about this. I don't believe that the J-45 style guitar is the best sounding guitar out there, but I do think that it has a very specific sound that certain people really like. And so for me, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. But if the J-45 sound is something that you want, and you think a Gibson J-45 sounds great, then you're absolutely going to love the Epiphone J-45 just as much as if it had a Gibson on the headstock. As far as the case is concerned, we have to give it a 0 out of 10 because as it stands at the $750 price point, it does not come with a case at all. And if you want a case, you do have to pay a little bit extra for that. Now to the hardware, the guitar does come with a solid bone nut and saddle, but it doesn't come with the greatest tuning machines that I've ever seen. They'll do the job, so we're going to give it a 6 out of 10 for a total of 31 points in the daily category. Moving on to the lifestyle category, let's start off with the scratch resistance test. Remember, the polyurethane finish on this guitar did hold up very, very well to our scratch resistance, so it's going to receive a 9 out of 10. On the liquid resistance test, we did have some slight blushing with only one of the chemicals that we applied to the guitar, but everything else held up very well, so we're going to give it an 8 out of 10. Now for the fall resistance test, remember the headstock on this guitar snapped right off very cleanly when we have not had that issue with a single other guitar that we've tested so far, so it's going to receive a 2 out of 10. As far as the string resistance test, the Epiphone J-45 held up very well to our light gauge strings all the way up to our heavy gauge strings with just a slight bellying issue, but that's to be expected on just about any guitar, so we're going to give it a 9 out of 10. And then on the dent resistance test, the guitar did receive dents, but on top of that, it also got small cracks where the ball drop happened, so we're going to give it a 5 out of 10, for a total of 33 points in the lifestyle category. Now for the heritage category. Starting off with trim and joinery, this guitar is well appointed with nice plastic binding throughout the whole guitar. And everything looks really well. I really don't have a whole lot of complaints. It doesn't look the best quality that I've ever seen, so we're going to give it an 8 out of 10. As far as the finish is concerned, you guys heard me raving about this semi-gloss polyurethane finish on this guitar, and I still stand by that, so we're going to give it a 9 out of 10. Fret quality, the guitar, once again, dialed in very, very well, played incredibly well, and I saw no issues with the frets at all, so we're going to give it a 10 out of 10. As far as the interior build quality, remember this is a $750 guitar, so we are grading on a curve based off of its price point, and the interior build quality really checked all the boxes for me. They went above and beyond. They put a Brazilian rosewood bridge plate on it. It has the scalloped tail block on the guitar. Very minimal amount of glue squeeze out. And yes, there were some braces that I do believe could be shaved down, but as far as the quality of the build, I am going to give it a 9 out of 10 on the inside. Now, brand value. This is the big one. Because it does say Epiphone on the headstock instead of Gibson, it is a significantly less expensive guitar. But Epiphone is a name that just about anybody knows, so we're going to give it a 7 out of 10 because I do believe that if you were to sell it, you could probably get most of your money back. And that'll give us a total of 43 points in the heritage category. That brings our grand total to 107 points, significantly beating out the much more expensive Gibson G-45 that we reviewed last year. My opinion is for $750, this is a fantastic buy if you're into that J-45 sound. So we hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we do recommend this guitar to you, and we'll see y'all in the next one.